Howdy, howdy. Sue here, and welcome to uh, this installment of Essential Units. Now, this is a series that I haven't done a video for in a very long time. A year and a half, I guess. I did a bunch of Essential Units videos after the first game came out, shortly after, maybe 3 or 4 months. And the point of the Essential Units series is to really try and use analysis to tease out the dwarf units that tend to punch above their weight, that tend to be very, very good choices in multiplayer. And a campaign and multiplayer are obviously very different. Multiplayer, you only have 12,400 gold and you're going up against another player. And the point of the series being, are there some units that really perform better than others that are, must picks or very good picks when you're going to be fighting in multiplayer. And the first series tried to look at the dwarves as a whole. At that time, there were a lot less factions, and it wasn't a perfect way to consider the dwarf units, but it was reasonable to look at that analysis, and we did tease out some very, very good units in certain situations. Now, as I move on to the Essential Units, my, updated version of Essential Units, I kind of want to just take a deeper dive on very specific matchups. And in this one, we're going to be looking at the Dwarfs versus the Lizardmen, and we're specifically going to be looking at the Infantry matchup and trying to tease out very, very good units for the Dwarfs in that Infantry matchup and to figure out why. Now, this video is very deep analysis. We're going to be staring at a spreadsheet. I get it if that's not for you. If you want, I'll put a summary at the end of the video. So just skip right to the end, look for the summary, and you can pick up kind of some of the basic information. But if you're like me and the analysis part is a lot of the fun for you, if you really like digging into the numbers and thinking about how you're going to analyze troops, just keep watching. Before you skip ahead, though, I will tease out a little bit of information which I think is interesting and valuable, and that is chevrons. I think I'm going to do the value of chevrons video, but just an FYI, if you are picking up your army for a multiplayer battle, one chevron is almost always a very, very good use of any kind of investment in that realm, because you get 2 stat points. You go from 30 and 48 to 31 and 50. Very, very good use of that 26 gold. And just the interesting tidbit is actually the way they've scaled the chevrons and how many stat points they give. If you look, when I go to 2 chevrons, I don't get any more melee attack. I just get extra melee defense. So 1 chevron is actually quite valuable. 2 chevrons is not a good place to stop. Then you go to 3 chevrons and you get more stat points. 4, again, it goes up nicely. And 5, actually, you only get melee defense and not melee attack. And then, and then you keep going up to 6, and that's where the next point is. So if you're going to add chevrons to your Longbeards or any other unit for that matter, just test this, take a look, because this is changing. One of the changes in the Tomb Kings update, and that's why I wanted to get this out, because I wanted a snapshot of the data before the Tomb Kings update, because I will re-look at some of this analysis afterwards. I just wanted to freeze it in time so I can always look back on this video to see where the stats were and whatnot. But the value of cost of chevrons is going up, so this might be 28 in the upcoming patch. And the melee defense increases are going down. So maybe this might cost 28 instead of going from 30 and 48 in melee attack and melee defense to 31 and 50. It might go to 31 and 49. So we'll watch that and actually do a bit of analysis there. But right now, chevrons are quite valuable, and I think they still The first chevron still will be, but we'll take a look at that. Now, when you do this kind of analysis, you have to pick and choose how you're going to isolate data. Now, I will look at each and every infantry unit in the comparison. I'm going to kind of rank them from worst to best, sort of, and we'll discuss what they are, but we're ranking them in terms of the melee engagement in the front line. So some of the units that we're going to rank may be quite useful in other areas, and the perfect example is the Slayers. They're not great at melee engagements, everyone knows that, but they are a must-have in this matchup overall. But we're just looking at the infantry engagement between the Dwarfs and the Lizardmen. Now, how I did this analysis is I looked at the Saurus warriors by themselves. I will make a second video, hopefully before Monday, showing the Saurus warriors with spears, because that is the unit you're most likely to see on the front line. But I did this for a very good reason. It's because it just worked out that the data between the Dwarf infantry units and the Lizardmen infantry units, Saurus warriors, was a very nice point to analyze other things, which I will do in another video, like how much better is a Longbeard if they're also receiving the buff from a Grumbling Guard, if they're receiving buffs from Thanes, from, you know, Thorgrim, from Runesmiths, and these types of things. And it's just a nice crossover point to look at that. But the Saurus warriors are, you might see some of them, hard to say, but the Saurus warriors with shields is actually the unit you're most likely going to see. They are just very simply, if you look at the crossover, they have +6 melee defense for an extra 50 gold. That's actually an extremely good value, and they do have shields. I mean, the shields are not really going to matter. It's highly unlikely you're going to target the Saurus warriors with anything ranged when you have Kroq-Gar on Grimlock, and you have, you know, maybe you have you know, big monstrous units and Cav and all these types of things. The Saurus warriors are going to be the last thing you are generally targeting with your ranged units, and so the shield doesn't matter, but those 6 melee defense points do matter, and it's generally 4 stat points are worth about 50 gold, about in there, and you get 6 for 50 gold. So this is the unit I would expect to see in the Dwarf matchup, making up at least part of the front line. You know, maybe 2 to 4 Saurus warriors in the Dwarf engagement. No, this is not going to be all the time, but this is a pretty good analysis, a pretty good bet that you're going to see Saurus warriors with shields. Now, it's pretty unlikely you're going to see Saurus spears. I think if someone brings Saurus spears or the shield units, they're just obviously made a mistake or misclicked or something, because in their weapon strength they have a big bonus versus large, and I did a few little test runs, and they lose badly against the Dwarf infantry for their cost in gold. Really, it is the Saurus warriors and the Saurus warriors with shields. I haven't looked at skink cohorts. I might take a quick peek at them in a later video, and I haven't looked at temple guards. Temple guards are actually quite good in general, but they lose a lot of their value against the Dwarfs because they have this big bonus versus large that will not be consumed. But I will take a look at them anyways in a later video. So we are going to look at every single Dwarf unit versus a Saurus warrior, and in later videos, I'm going to try and get all 3 out this weekend. We're going to look at some of the units that are very kind of close, and how much of a difference buffing them up with runesmiths and other ways really helps to see which buffs are actually the most valuable to bring. Like if we have a runesmith here, is it worth it to bring Forge Fire? You know, it costs 143 gold. Is it worth it to bring Rune of Oath and Steel? Is it worth it to bring Rune of Wrath and Ruin? Quick tip, yes it is, always. Rune of Wrath and Ruin is so good. Or a Rune of Negation, you know, it's 162. Are these things worth it? Is it, well, I didn't look at Master Rune of Groth when I just plus 8 leadership. I don't think that's worth it for the Dwarfs. Or the Hammer of Karak draws. I actually have done some testing on that against Lords and other things, and we will look at the value of this Hammer of Karak draws. But really, I also isolated all of these skills against some of the Dwarf Infantry to see which skills are actually the most valuable, and that will be in the second video. So without further ado, we're going to go and do some spreadsheet work and take a look at how I've set up the analysis and how I tried to isolate the units. Basically, I just have a mod here so that I can have one unit versus one unit. Again, this isn't quite perfect because you know, your leadership, it gets is a little wonkier and you don't have any buffs and everything, but we have to think about this analysis in some way to isolate data, and I will do some mini battles to show the front line versus the front line and kind of what they can do near the end of this video. So we're gonna go take a look at the spreadsheet and start looking at how we've analyzed this. Alright, so this is what the basic data looks like, and this is how I've organized it. I will go over each element so that we can understand it, and then we'll start ranking how the units stack up against Saurus warriors. Not the shielded version, but again, I will compare the shielded version later, because that is the version you're most likely to see in a fight against the Saurus warriors, or against the Lizardmen in an online battle. So we look at the Longbeards. Really, what is their cost? 650 gold. The Saurus warriors, what is their cost? 750 gold. And I wanted to get a damage per second or a damage output. So I timed when I sent them to fight each other, when did the engagement start exactly? At 59 minutes 15 seconds. When did it finish exactly? 54 minutes and 14 seconds. How long did the battle take? 301 seconds. And then we got an average down there. It generally takes 277 seconds, which is about 4.5 minutes for this engagement to complete. And we look at the starting hit points of the Longbeards and the finishing hit points, and from that we get a damage per second that the Saurus warriors are doing to the Longbeards, 19.99, so in general about 22 DPS. And vice versa, we look at the Saurus warrior starting hit points, 7650, and their finishing hit points, you know, average 1767. What was the DPS that the Longbeards were doing to the Saurus warriors? It was about 21. Now the analysis part is, this is the baseline data. Okay, now trying to think about how to value this engagement is not real easy. But you got to try and isolate something, and I think because you have a fixed amount of gold, 12,400, both players have that, looking at the gold differential is really important. So what I have here is gold differential, and this minus 25 gold is the total number, meaning at the end of the engagement, when the Longbeard starts to rout, they have 619 hit points left of their original 6,600, and that means they have a ratio of gold left out of their original 650. They are routing and they are not actually useful, so technically they've lost all their gold value for some amount of time while the Saurus warriors can keep on attacking because they've won, but they may come back at some point. So I just wanted to stop right there to look at the engagement. So really, after this engagement's done, the Longbeards have lost a total of 25 gold in this engagement, so the Lizardmen player has in essence gained 25 gold on you. So they're winning that engagement. And then I looked at the gold per minute. How much gold per minute is the differential. So in this case, we're losing 5 gold per minute, and because we lost the win-loss. So 0 is a loss and 1 is a win. And we look at the summary data. Basically, in this engagement, we're losing 13 gold total in general. and about 3 gold per minute, and we might win this very rarely, but it's this might have been an outlier, but we can win this. Once we start buffing this, we'll see the difference, and that's why this is actually Saurus Warriors, not the shielded version. Makes sense for the long term, or a lot of the buff analysis, because it works out quite nicely. And then I'll go and compare that to the Saurus Warriors with shields, which is, they cost 800 and their extra 6 melee defense points are very good. And again, the reason I wanted to do this now is because the Longbeards are changing. They're going to lose some of their charge bonus and some of their starting hit points. And I just wanted to freeze this information in time. And I will do an update analysis after Tomb King drops to see how this changes. Because I'm curious. And some of the other dwarf units have changed a little bit, and we'll take a look at that. So without further ado, we're going to go down and look at every single dwarf infantry unit versus the Saurus Warriors and try and sort of rank them. You can't precisely do that because the cost is so different, but I'll just have a little blurb on that, and we'll talk about, worst to first, who does the best and why, and then we'll do a little bit of testing at the end. I'll do a couple quick battles to demonstrate the value of what I'm showing. So, all right, so we're going to go down and start taking a look at which is the weakest dwarf infantry unit in an infantry engagement against the Lizardmen against Saurus Warriors. And I'm sure this will be no surprise to anyone. It is the basic Slayer. Now, again, Slayers are actually a must-have in this battle. But in a frontline melee engagement against Saurus Warriors, they get demolished. They cost 900 against the 750, and they lose every battle, and they get tromped on. So you set your Slayers up against Saurus Warriors. First of all, they lose fast in 110 seconds, so not even 2 minutes. Secondly, you lose a lot of gold, 410 total gold. So it's just like starting with 1,200 gold instead of 12,000 gold instead of 12,400. But you're losing 227 gold per minute if you ever have them in a frontline engagement. So, I think every player knows this. Keep your Slayers away from a melee engagement. That's long been known, and so this is no surprise to anyone, I would guess. But Slayers are very good in this total. But man, I was surprised how badly they lost and how much they cost. So if you ever get them in that engagement, maybe you might want to use them for a rear charge, almost like Cav once in a while, but they're very poor in the frontline infantry engagement. But again, that's not what they're used for. So let's go to the next weakest unit. Again, no surprise, the Miners. Now Miners are kind of quite a bit different because they're very cheap. They're only $325. But the thing is, they lose incredibly fast against the Saurus Warriors. They're only in there for 89 seconds on average. You're losing 82 gold per minute, and you still lose 119 gold total because the Saurus Warriors start with 7,600 hit points and end with 6,300. So of the 750 gold they cost, they still have a lot of their gold and value left. And they don't do a whole lot of damage, 15 DPS versus the Saurus Warriors 50. It's actually, Saurus Warriors do more damage per second against the Slayers, right? They do 60 DPS against the Slayers. But this is not a surprise. That said, 3 Miners can take a Saurus Warrior. So once you get up to 975, the Miners actually can take the Saurus Warriors. And this is a really difficult point to analyze, is the when you get on the ends of the differential in cost, how do you analyze this? Because 3 Miners can take a Saurus Warrior, and they're just 975 instead of 900, so they're not as bad as you'd think. But we're just looking at single units, and you can make that judgment call. There are better cheap units to use rather than Miners against Saurus Warriors if you need to, because these guys, if they get in an engagement, they are going to get murdered. All right, the next worst unit, the Dragonback Slayers. you know, the one redeeming quality is they still, the battle time takes about the same as the original Slayers, 102 seconds as opposed to 109. But the big differential is why they're up, even though they cost a lot more, is they do win sometimes. You know, they won 60% of the time in my analysis. Again, you're not going to use Dragonback Slayers in a frontline engagement with Saurus Warriors. I get it. But I just wanted to see. And in total, they lose 357 total gold and 205 gold per minute. But they do start winning. So, I mean, I don't think these three are any surprise to anyone for a frontline infantry engagement against actually any faction. But this is how I'm going about the analysis. So the next unit is Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. You know, they lose in just over 2 minutes, and they're only at 22 DPS, damage per second. Saurus Warriors do 38 to them. You lose 148 total gold, basically 68.7 gold per minute. This is something I did see is, if there is one thing to learn by the end, is that your great weapon variants are not as valuable as your shielded variants in general against Saurus Warriors. Saurus Warriors, I think, only have 60 armor, so you get a little more value out of your one-handed units, and your great weapon variants are generally not a great choice until you get into the upper echelons of your great weapon variants. So Dwarf Warriors with great weapons lose handily. They lose gold in that engagement, and the gold per minute is basically 68. So we'll go to the next one, and it's straight up the Longbeards with great weapons. So this is interesting. Longbeards with great weapons cost precisely the same as the Saurus Warriors, 750 gold. The thing is, the reason, even though they lose a little bit more total gold in this, they lose less gold per minute and they last longer. So that's why I evaluated the Longbeards with great weapons as being a better choice if you have to pick something than a Dwarf Warrior with great weapons. They last longer and they lose less gold per minute. But they really get tromped on. It is not even close, really. They're both 750 gold. The Longbeards with great weapons are really, you're leaving the Saurus Warriors with 2,800 hit points on average when this is done. They might be able to win that. There was one very, very close battle in here, but they lost them all, and they lose a lot of gold. Their Longbeards with great weapons are just not a good choice for the frontline engagement against the Lizardmen. So we'll go to the next one. The Ekron Miners. So this is our second regiment of renown. And, you know, they're only 600 gold. They do last for 3 minutes. You know, they have a lot of boosted stats, but their hit points are a little low. They lose a total of 177 gold, and they're losing at 60 gold per minute. The big problem with Ekron Miners is that they have 3 blasting charges each. They just can't get them off. Ekron Miners, in general, if you were able to reliably use all 3 of your blasting charges, their value goes up quite a bit. They got to be treated a little more like a ranged unit that you have to protect. And then once they've used their blasting charges, if you go and put them in a melee engagement, you'll actually pull a good value. But in this case, they get off 1 blasting charge and then get into the fight. Sometimes 2 total, because they'll keep throwing at the back. But really, not outstanding. They'll lose 177 gold and 60 gold per minute. The next unit is our classic Dwarf Warrior at 450. You know, they only lose a total of 114 gold in that engagement, and you can see a big drop in the total gold per minute, only 40 gold per minute. They're going to lose that engagement, but they're going to last for 3 minutes. So if you're very, very low on funds and you do want to put an extra unit on the field for the frontline engagement, a Dwarf Warrior is not an awful choice, understanding that they're definitely going to lose, but they're going to hold out for 3 minutes. So you have time to do something to help support the Dwarf Warriors. But they're still a losing proposition. You're going to lose 114 gold and 39 gold per minute. The next unit on our list is miners with blasting charges. So I was kind of surprised at these guys. They're not awful. And what this is telling me is they're only 400 gold. They don't last for very long. They only last 140 seconds. But they're only losing 70 gold, 31 gold per minute. And they're not going to win that engagement. But what this says is these blasting charges that they have, they only have one shot of blasting charges, are worth more than the 50 gold that you pay to get them. So miners with blasting charges, not too bad. And not an awful choice if you're picking up a unit, for cheap. Would I put them in the front line? They might be better than the Dwarf Warrior. They are, in my analysis, obviously better than the Dwarf Warrior, because you can put them just behind the line, make sure you reliably get off all your blasting charges, but you usually can, even in a one-on-one, without much of a problem. And they can disrupt charges, they can disrupt lines, and they're not great, but you get pretty decent value, and there is other ways to get value out of the miners with blasting charges. So a surprising spot for these guys. I was happy to see this, and it doesn't look like blasting charges have been nerfed in the update, so good. The next unit we have is here our Longbeard, which is kind of center of the road. They're basically, the gold differential is almost at 0, minus 13 and minus 2. They won 20% of these, but I would expect that if I fought these a lot, it would go down to maybe 10%. The point being is that Longbeard is just a reasonable choice. They're gonna sit in the pocket for 4.5 minutes against a Saurus Warrior and defend. They also have the encouragement aura, because they're old grumblers, which is quite valuable actually in battles where your lord might get dumpstered and you lose him. And this is one of the reasons why in general the Dowie are good, and the Longbeards are just an outstanding unit. They're still one of the best all-arounders for the Dwarfs, but they are getting a nerf. They're losing some of their charge bonus and health. So we're going to see how that plays out and do the analysis and do just an update of the analysis. But they're not too bad. And once you see, they're in a nice position, because once you buff them, we'll actually be able to compare the different buffs relative to each other across the Longbeard quite nicely in the engagement with the Saurus Warriors. It's a very nice analysis point. So Longbeard is kind of your inflection point. And they are getting close in cost, but they cost less, and they can hold them there for a long time. Longbeards are quite good. The next unit we have on here is our Ironbreaker. Now here we have a big jump in the value. We go from basically negative, and we'll call it 0, to gaining a lot of value. So our Ironbreakers are going to gain 233 gold. They're a lot more expensive, 1,200 versus 750. They're gaining 55 gold per minute. They will win that engagement very reliably. But the problem with Ironbreakers has always been is look how long the battle takes. Just over 4 minutes. So you're going to tie up 1,200 gold against 750 for over 4 minutes. Yes, you're going to win. I look at the DPS of the Saurus Warriors, only 8, versus 22 against the Longbeards. But in this case, you can basically have 2 Longbeards for 1 Ironbreaker, and those 2 Longbeards are going to do a good job, and a better job, I think, in general. But it's hard to say. Their blasting charges also, they only reliably get off 1. If you can reliably get off both of your Ironbreakers, are going to be a little more valuable. The key thing here is in the update, they have actually increased the Ironbreakers' armor piercing value, which is a big deal. So they're only doing 24 DPS. So we have a unit of Longbeards at 650 doing 21 DPS, and our Ironbreakers at 1,200 only doing 24. Yeah, they're not getting hurt, but they're not really doing any damage, and that is one of the difficulties of pulling an Ironbreaker, because they're a lot more expensive. Yes, they hold down a position for very reliably. They are a good unit, but they just don't do damage. So you're going to have them tied up for a very long time against a much weaker unit. And yeah, they'll hold a lot of hit points, but they're going to be, one of only 2 units left at the end of the game, and they're still going to be doing very little damage. So that's why they're just on this side. And there are going to be some units that actually make less gold, but are a little better in my estimation. So we'll move on from there. So the next unit we have is the Hammer. Now, the Hammers are, again, 1100, so they're a little more expensive, but you expect them to win every time, and they do. And the big reason why Hammers are actually valuable is their total DPS. I mean, the battle is over in 90 seconds. And, here, you look at the Ironbreaker, the battle's over in 4 minutes. Here, the battle's over in 90 seconds. I have, 2.5 minutes to do something with my Hammers while my Ironbreakers are still engaged. They do 67 DPS. Though the Saurus Warriors do a lot of damage back, but they're gaining generally 60 gold out of that engagement and 40 gold per minute. So they're not gaining as much gold per minute because they do die quickly, but they kill very fast. The advantage of the Hammers over the Ironbreakers, in my estimation, is Hammers actually are very nice for receiving buffs. I mean, you give a Hammer with this massive weapon strength a +5 melee attack, they will use all of it. You give them a Runesmith with Forge Fire, they use all of it. You give them other elements, they use the buffs very, very well. And this is the first unit that I would say is maybe not an essential unit in this engagement, but if you can protect and use the Hammer as well, give them a little buff, they're pretty good. And they do pull value out of that engagement, but they are quite expensive. This question will come up again and again, but they're very good. So the next unit we have is a Grumbling Guard. Now, the Grumbling Guard is going to pull out more gold total at 77 than the Hammer. They cost a little less. They pull out less gold per minute, but they do win that engagement pretty reliably. Where the Grumbling Guard picks up its big value, in my estimation, and I think this is the first, what I would call, essential unit. This is the first must-pick unit against the Lizardmen, is the Grumbling Guard. I think they are an absolute must-pick for that engagement, because not only are they going to win the one-on-one engagement, they are expensive, but they do have the encouragement aura, which helps leadership, and they do have that vigor aura, and boy does it make a difference. In the next video we're going to show some testing I did with that vigor aura to see exactly how powerful it is, to see exactly how much gold it adds. But the Grumbling Guard are a must-pick in this engagement. It does take them a lot longer, like twice as long, 184 seconds to go chew through Saurus Warriors, but this is not the point of the Grumbling Guard. It is that Vigor aura. And I've talked about Vigor so many times as being just critical for the Dwarfs. Just because of the way Vigor works, the 2 elements that Vigor loss hurts the most are armor and melee defense. So when you're exhausted, your melee defense is effectively less, at about 65% of what it started, and same with your armor usage. It's effectively 65%. So if you had 100 armor, it's effectively 65 when you're exhausted. And dwarfs have the high melee defense and armor as a feature of the faction, so they are the most affected by vigor loss. And in some of the testing I do with the Grumbling Guard, it is impressive what that vigor boost does. Doesn't do anything at the start when both the Saurus Warriors and the unit they're fighting are both fresh, but it snowballs so fast when the Saurus Warriors get too winded and tired and very tired. The Daoi units still being fresh just start to absolutely demolish them, because they lose that 60 armor and melee defense, and then the one-handed dwarfs come on very strong. So Grumbling Guard, the first essential unit, I think a must-have against the Lizardmen for specifically that frontline engagement. The next unit on our list is the Dwarf Warriors, the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. Now these guys, man, are they good. You know, if you look here, our Ironbreakers are doing 24 DPS to Saurus Warriors. So we look down, the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass are doing 31. They won this engagement every time. They did it in a reasonable amount of time. Like the Grumbling Guard is an armor-piercing unit, and that costs 1,000, and it took them 184 seconds. The Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, it only took 196. So the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass they really do punch above their weight, because they only cost 700 gold. Saurus Warriors are 750, and they are a pretty reliable winner in that engagement. Now, this is how I know CA is really paying attention to the data. This is where one of the nerfs is coming. The Warriors of Dragonfire Pass have, I think in the update for the Tomb Kings, have had their melee attack reduced, which is really going to make a big difference on their own DPS, which is going to pull down their value a little bit. But they got 168 gold. Like, that's a big jump over the Grumbling Guard, and they're getting 51 gold per minute. It's almost double, and that's really a very nice position to be in. The Warriors of Dragonfire Pass are a must-have. They are an essential unit. At the moment, that might change a little on Monday, only 2 days away. But I'll pick up the analysis. They are just really, really good. They do fire damage on top of everything, and have good leadership and good stats, and they kill fast, and they have that bonus versus infantry. They are an essential unit. They are outstanding. So really that's, and they're cheap, like 700 versus 750. I mean, you just can't not bring them in that frontline engagement against the Lizardmen, because they overperform. So we will move on, and the next unit we have on our list is the Norgremlings Ironbreakers. Now these guys are hard to evaluate, because they are 1,500 gold. They're double the cost of the Saurus Warriors, but they pull out a lot of gold in that differential, right? They basically take 430 gold, and they're getting 153 gold per minute. They're going to win every time. The big thing is look at the DPS the Saurus Warriors are doing, 6. That's nothing. But the thing that makes the Norgremlings Ironbreakers quite good is they do good DPS, 36. That's really quite good. So they're finishing that engagement in 171 seconds. And if you look at the regular Ironbreakers, that's 250. They're doing 255. So they're a minute and a half longer. So the Regimental Renown Ironbreakers are very, very good. And if you look at the end of the engagement, they start with 8,400 hit points. They end with 7,500. And just by way of, I didn't do a data set for this, but one Norgremlings Ironbreaker can take 3 Saurus Warriors, not 2, which would be 1,500 gold, but they can take 3 of them pretty reliably. They're extremely good. The big problem here in this analysis, and why I don't think they're an essential unit in this matchup, even though they're really, really high up. I didn't really know how else to slot them, is they're so expensive. Yes, they can take 3 Saurus Warriors all by themselves, but they get a few artillery shots, 1 spell, a couple of charges, and that 1,500 gold unit being demolished is going to make you a sad panda. This is hard to evaluate. In multiplayer, really expensive units tend to lose value fast. But I mean, you can't deny the numbers. The data here is here. They're getting 153 gold per minute against the Saurus Warrior, which is worth half of what they are. They can take 3 Saurus Warriors by themselves and still have Ironbreakers left to go fight somebody else. They are just a big risk. So I don't think they're essential, but I do think they are, just as in the straight up analysis, they do have more value. So you can discuss that and think about it, I guess. But yeah, they're beasts. And the last unit on our list, a Peak Gate Guard. These guys are ridiculous. They're the same cost, 1,500. They dispatched these Saurus warriors in 1 minute. They are doing 95 DPS. 245 gold. They're getting 241 gold per minute. They are a high-risk unit, though. Again, one charge, Crockguard plows through them before they get to the line. One spell, and then, again, you're a sad panda. You're a sad dwarf. There's going to be tears in your beard when your 1,500 gold is all chewed up. But I mean, if you can somehow find a way to get them engaged in the pure frontline melee, they are crushing. And again, a Peak Gate Guard can take 2 Saurus warriors by themselves easily, and they can take 3. So really, they are a high value in just the straight up engagement, and their numbers are off the charts. 95 DPS, 245 gold they're winning, but 241 gold per minute. They are really, really strong. So that's really the units as they lay out. Now, that's the analysis, and again, I love comments. So if you have questions or a different way of considering this analysis, I'd love to hear it. But we're going to go and actually test some of this stuff in a battle and just see what it looks like and see how these things play out when we actually get into a fight. All right, so we're going to do a bit of a little fun battle to show our essential units, and along with a Longbeard with 1 chevron up against 3 Saurus warriors with shields. And again, these are the more likely ones you will see in the front line for the Lizardmen. I know they're not the ones I did the analysis on, but I do have analysis I've already done, which I'll show in a later video. And we'll just see how they perform, and you'll see how strong that buff from the Grumbling Guard is. So and this is an engagement you might expect. You might expect to see 3 Saurus warriors in a Lizardmen build. You might even see 4 or 5, but at least 3, I would think, is going to be something that you'll reliably see. And this is a nice front line. You could even chevron these guys up to 4. When they're at 4, actually, and I'll show in a later video, they beat the Saurus warriors straight up. And when they're 6, they're worth 800. These guys are worth 800. They beat them very reliably. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to bring them down to 1 chevron, which I think is a very good use of gold in a online battle, and we'll go take a look. And these, sometimes testing never works out, but doesn't work out quite right. But we'll see how this works out. We're just on Glacial Lake because it's a very short map, and I've set them up as the attacker, so they should come in relatively quickly. And I'll try and put my Grumbling Guard in the center of the formation to make sure their vigor buff hits everyone. Oh, that's them. Warriors Dragonfire Pass. Okay, good enough. We will take guard mode off, group them, and we'll lock, put them up here, start, and get them going. Alright, I'm just going to fast forward that, and if we look at his Vigor Aura buff, it's pretty good. Now, one of the things we'll say before the engagement is this Vigor Aura buff is, if you can hit 2 units with it, you're doing very good. It's actually quite difficult to do that, to hit 2 units with it, but you will be able to hit 1 unit with it pretty reliably. But for the purposes of this testing, I've just left them in a close formation to do exactly that, and we'll go ahead and look at the gauge. I don't know why these guys are not coming in. What are you guys doing? Whatever. Well, this is not a very good test. Oh, here they come. Well, this isn't this is not what I would call a perfect test, but we'll just let it keep running. You can run this test on your own and kind of see how things work out. You'll notice my Longbeards are losing, and so are my Dwarf Warriors of Dragonfire Pass. But you'll see that they're fresh. These guys are fresh, so they're getting that buff. And these guys now are very tired, exhausted, and tired. Now you can see they've gone into winning the combat. These guys will switch over by the end, and this is kind of where the power of the Grumbling Guard really does start to come in. They start off a little bit slow, but then by the end of the fight they are really doing quite well. And we can put them all here. It doesn't... Come on, boys. Yeah. So, you can see, we have... The Longbeards have just a little less than half their health. The Warriors of Dragonfire Pass have about half health, and these guys have more than half health. I could run this a dozen times and win it a dozen times. It just didn't quite go off right, because sometimes the AI doesn't quite cooperate, but well, and these guys are still fighting. Interesting. I know that's a bug that they mentioned in the Tomb King's update, is that now the fleeing unit will no longer fight. But anyway, so let's end that battle. We're going to do one more, actually, not with these guys, but I'll show you. But you can see, 84 losses versus 171. I know they didn't quite come into the battle right, but run it yourself. You will reliably win that engagement with these three units configured in the way that I've shown. And again, these guys are 10,024. These guys are 10,000. So this set of three is actually cheaper than this set of three, and they are going to win reliably. And they will actually win reliably even if you only get your Grumbling Guard buff on one of these two units. It's hard. It is really hard to get it on two. But they will win that. Now, something that's interesting and fun is we're going to take our Peak Gate Guard, and we're just going to get rid of these guys. Just for a fun little test to show how ridiculous these guys are, and especially when you pair them up with a Runesmith. So Runesmith, we're going to keep this Forge Fire, 10% armor piercing damage, because these guys have 40 armor piercing, so they'll make very good use of it. We're not going to use the armor. We're going to use the Rune of Wrath and Ruin. We're not going to use the Rune of Negation, and we're not going to use the Hammer of Karak Draw. So these guys, they're at 10,066. Again, these guys are at 10,000. So this is actually cheaper than these three units. But we're going to do this for fun. But again, these are very high risk configuration, but they're redonkulous. So let's just go look at how these guys do. It's these Peak Gate Guards are ridiculous, and with the Runesmith in there, boy oh boy, you're let's put them like this, group, and we'll lock them, and we'll just get these guys going here. I mean, I don't know, and we'll just go ahead and chew through them. Get his Rune of Wrath and Ruin going. Okay, we'll go here. Rune of Wrath and Ruin. Okay. We'll just get the fight going in the middle. They will get totally surrounded, but they are just dumpstering them. It is ridiculous how fast these guys kill. And we'll get the Rune of Wrath and Ruin going again. We'll get it over here. And again, we're fighting 3 units with 2, so this is really... the problem is these 2 units didn't need to come and engage, right? So we'll just hit the Rune of Wrath and Ruin again. And I don't know if these guys are going to come back or not. Yeah, okay, they are. And we'll hit the Rune of Wrath and Rune again. So, alright, come on, break, you guys. Rune of Wrath and Rune again. Well, not quite perfect, but... Well, yeah, these are... The Saurus Warriors are... Oh, wait. Get this Rune of Wrath and Rune again. Get over here. So very close, but the battle goes quickly. But they're, again, you can see they they win this. They do a lot of DPS. If you do that a bunch of times, you're going to win a lot of those. But they're fighting the Saurus Warriors with shields. But again, that's a reasonable combination to get in there, and they can win that fight. Now these guys. That's where this extra 6 melee defense really makes a difference. If I'd gone against the Saurus Warriors without the shields, these guys can beat 3 of them by themselves. I mean, not reliably, but they can. And that Runesmith with his Forge Fire, you can see, let me see, Forge Fire right here. You can see these guys have the Forge Fire on them. You know, they have 44 armor piercing, and they do armor sundering and magical attacks and everything else like that. So, anyways, kind of a fun way of looking at it. And that battle was over relatively quickly. But that's why these guys are a lot higher risk, because sometimes these guys really plow through, and sometimes they don't do quite as good. They're a bit higher risk. You can see though that the other configuration with the essential units did better in general against these 3. And they will be more reliable on your front line. This is just kind of a fun engagement just to watch and look. So that is the end. So we'll see. Yeah, close victory. 147, 35 killed, and that's how it went. So to really summarize, at the end of this, our essential units in this matchup really are our Grumbling Guard and the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, and supplement with Longbeards as you like. I would always put 1 Chevron in there, but if you really wanted to, I mean, you could take the Grumbling Guard out, although I wouldn't, but these Longbeards against... like if I were to do this, where's my Longbeards? And grab like this, and we'll see in the second analysis. If I chevron them up to just over 800, if they have 6 chevrons, all of these guys will reliably beat all the Saurus Warriors. So the chevrons are really good, but that value is going down in the next patch. But in summary, our essential units are the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass and our Grumbling Guard. I think these are must picks. You can put them as your first 2 in any engagement with the Lizardmen. Both of these, I think, are getting a little debuff, and we're going to see exactly how that plays out. And you can fill out your line with Longbeards if you want 1, 2. You know, if they maybe want a pretty wide line, you can give them all 1 chevron, or you can give them all, I think 4 chevrons would be the next step up. They get quite a bit better. You know, that's an incredibly powerful front line right there. And this is your kind of minimal front line, I would say, against the Lizardmen with these 3 units to be ready to face up against the Saurus Warriors. The other 2 units that are interesting are the Norgrimling's Ironbreakers and your Peakgate Guard. They're really expensive, high risk. And also the Hammers. Hammers in combination with that same combination with a Runesmith are quite powerful. But again, they're a little more expensive, a little high risk, but you could definitely have a line that looked like this with the hammers. Again, I put one chevron on them. It is so valuable, just one, because you can see they go from 46 and 34 to 47 and 36. That's a big boost, but that's going to change again in the update. So that's actually a really good front line, and you can support them in many different ways. You know, they will kill pretty fast, and they will give you options in that fight. Again, the units you absolutely do not want to have in your front line are your Slayers. You know, either version, Dragonback Slayers and regular Slayers are actually both very good in this matchup, but keep them the hell away from Saurus Warriors, because they will get crushed. And I will say the, not surprise unit, but just not too bad, is your lowly miners with blasting charges. If you wanted to pop one of these guys in there because you had an extra bit of gold, you know, you chevron them up once and you get off those blasting charges, they're not awful. Like you have 400, say 450 gold at the end, you're better off to chevron this guy up than get a Dwarf Warrior and use those blasting charges, because they will perform a little better, unless you're going to use a Dwarf Warrior for defending against Cav or something. So, yeah, the miners blasting charges aren't awful. They do lose money, but if you can get off your blasting charges in the right place, maybe to support your hammers to make sure they kill even faster than they normally do, and then stuff them in the engagement with the Longbeards, so they're getting the buff from the Grumbling Guard, they could be actually pretty good. So that's really the end of this video. You know, that's the essential units for the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass and the Grumbling Guard right now, and I will update that analysis. I hope anyone who's watched this found it interesting. You know, if you like analysis, you know, hopefully you have some comments. And you know, these videos take a long time to research and look through, and you know, I work full time, busy life, and I know some people have been, hey, where are your videos? You're slowing down. You know, I'm doing my best to stay on top of this, and you know, I try to kind of stay on what's really interesting me at the time. But if this stuff interests you, you know, subscribe on the bottom. That subscribe or like or comment, those things, they really are kind of motivating. You know, and you know, it helps you find a little extra time at the end of the night before you go to bed to spend an extra hour, you know, working on this stuff, so we can share it with you. And I really do appreciate, you know, subscriptions are very motivating. You see, because I get to see they pop up on my phone, so it's a really nice, and I do appreciate it. So if you found this interesting and you want to see more of this specifically, I'm going to have 2 more videos on this specific matchup. Maybe one, I'll see, but I'm going to specifically look at buffs and how effective they are. And again, I want to get these all out before the Tomb Kings drops. Actually, I should take a look at these guys, miners, and see how much it costs to put up their ranks. Because I did I think 3 the value of chevrons videos, and I've used the miners as my test subject. So, okay, so fully chevroned up, they're 500. Anyways, yeah, like, subscribe, comment. It's very motivating for me. I've been very busy, but you know, hopefully I can squeeze in an extra 30 minutes or an hour per week, or and get more to you guys, especially you guys who love this type of analysis. My other true dwarf kin out there that do enjoy this stuff, I do appreciate hearing from you. So again, hope you found it interesting, and have a good one.